How's everybody doing? In this video, I'm just going to talk about something that I heard on Philip McKnight's channel. I'm sure if you are watching this video, you've probably seen his videos before. He's a much bigger channel. If you haven't, of course, go check him out, Philip McKnight on YouTube. But in one of his live streams that I was watching, he brought up a point that it would be, I don't know if he thought they would sell better, I don't remember, but he brought up the idea of calling Epiphones Gibsons. I think it might have been something related to the headstock design and everything. But he went off on saying how, like with Fenders, you have Fender guitars under the brand Fender. Most of them, if I had to guess, are probably made in Mexico, and they're great quality, you know, just standard kind of design. And then you have made in America Fenders, and then you have Fender guitars under the brand Fender that are made just in kind of various other countries, and they're not super strict on calling it a Fender versus something else. Obviously they have Squiers, but they will still sell Fenders at times just as cheap as a Squier and made in the Far East somewhere. And for the Fender brand, that seems to work. So the point in that video on Philip McKnight's channel on that live stream was, why doesn't Gibson do that with Epiphone? And here's where I'm going to weigh in and explain why I feel like Gibson has decided not to do that, or why it wouldn't work for them. And this is just speculation, this is just my opinion on it. So when you look at Fender as a brand, you have all these, you know, made in Mexico Fender standard strats or player series or whatever. And those are pretty good quality guitars, and they have various features on them that you probably would get as standard on a higher end like American made model, or if not, you could easily upgrade a made in Mexico Fender to have the same features as the made in America model. Now there may be some difference in distinguishing how they select the wood for the guitars made in Mexico versus made in America versus made in Korea in the past, or wherever they would make them overseas now. But a lot of the features that you would find on a made in America Fender that might cost $1,500, you could potentially buy a made in Mexico Fender and add those features on for less money. And you could probably get it to a point where it would be very difficult to distinguish a modified made in Mexico or an overseas Fender from a made in America super expensive Fender. And the reason why it would be difficult to distinguish them given the same features is because their finishes are largely the same. And what I mean by that is most made in Mexico Fenders that I'm aware of have either a polyurethane or polyester sort of hard coat finish, but the made in America Fenders mostly have the same sort of finish. So if you had a guitar that you're feeling the finish of and it's like a polyurethane finish, and then you just upgraded all the features, then you have essentially the same product as the made in America one. And by the way, when I'm saying upgrading the features, I'm not talking about just electronics. I would include things like rolling the fretboard, or, you know, things that would make it feel better, which might be standard on the American model versus the Mexican model. I'm aware of that. But those are still things that you could do to a Mexican-made Fender, and it would basically bring it right up to the level of an American Fender. So to me, there's a lot more sense there as to why they call them all a Fender. Now that's just my opinion. Feel free to post your opinion in the comments. But the whole thing with the finishes as well is why I have personally not bought an American-made Fender before, and I've bought several Mexican-made ones, because why would I want to spend that much money on a guitar with a polyurethane finish? I don't. But that's what the Fender brand basically is now, is probably 90% or more of them, no matter where they're made, have a polyurethane or polyester finish, and that's fine. That's what people expect. That's consistent. In this live stream that Philip McKnight had, they said, why would you not just change the headstock and call Epiphones Gibsons and they might sell more? Now obviously you're going to get the same sort of spec offerings on paper, like you might have a, you know, an Epiphone and a Gibson both have a mahogany neck set to a mahogany body with a maple top and a rosewood fretboard. And I will say this may be true with like a Fender Strat as far as wood selection. I would expect they would go to a greater length for a much more expensive American Strat to select a better piece of wood, and then they would basically throw out more wood that they just don't determine is good enough on a higher priced instrument, that is to say. But Gibson definitely selects better wood than Epiphones. I've played plenty of Epiphones and I've played a handful of Gibsons in my life, and the wood on the Gibsons is always more resonant. That could be down to the wood selection, and it is definitely down to the finish as well. So the main reason, and this being the just clearest limiting factor in my opinion as to why they could not call Epiphones Gibsons, is because of the finish. So you know how I said an American or Mexican made Strat could both have a polyurethane finish and therefore they're harder to distinguish? Well, an Epiphone will probably have a polyurethane finish, but a Gibson will not have a polyurethane finish. It'll have a nitrocellulose lacquer. And in my opinion, that one reason alone is easily enough to explain why you couldn't call one brand the other brand. Because if you started to have this idea that a Gibson might have a polyurethane hard finish, which in my experience takes a lot of resonance out of any instrument that has that versus having nitro, then you've devalued the entire Gibson brand, because people would think of it as, well, it could have a poly finish. Again, if that was the standard for a very long time, like how it is with Fender, I mean, Fender used to have nitro finishes on everything, but then they switched quite a while ago to having mostly poly finishes, and people have accepted it, and that is the standard. There's nothing wrong with that. But if that was the standard with Gibsons, there would also be nothing wrong with that, but it's not. It would create a totally different feeling for the instruments, and you'd have some guitars that had a noticeable lack of resonance compared to the others, and it would really mess with their brand. So no matter what you did to an Epiphone, you could change all the hardware, all the electronics to, Switchcraft, whatever, high-end electronics. You could change it to American-made Gibson pickups. You could give it high-end tuners. You could do whatever you want to it. The entire finish of the guitar is going to limit the performance of the Epiphone versus the Gibson. Therefore, they cannot call an Epiphone a Gibson. But there you go. I don't usually do videos like this, but when I heard that point in that live stream, it kind of made me think about it, and to me, that's the biggest thing. It's more of a speculative kind of just, why don't they do it? Why would they do it? Why would they not do it? If you like this video, don't forget to share it and subscribe. If you have any different opinions on the branding situation and why they would or wouldn't call a brand one thing versus another, let me know in the comments. We can have a discussion. I'm not trying to start any arguments with anybody, but I'm open to, different opinions and civil discussion in the comments. But yeah, share this video, give it a like, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.